containers are helping for servlets, EJBs, and in Spring how containers are useful, right? Yeah, let us go little in depth into containers. Okay, containers is the first part. Yeah, without containers, in general, how we implement application in general. Okay, if you don't have any container, if it is a standalone application, you will be having presentation GUI, maybe using swings. Yeah, yeah. I'm doing recording. I'm doing recording, and I'll keep it into our portal and share it with you. Okay. Yeah. So the GUI is here. Okay. So from GUI swings, right? Swings, AWTs, standalone applications we can design. So I'm just talking about standalone, just standalone, not even right. So if you see here, calculator is one of standalone, right? The similar standalone applications we can design using swings. All this GUI, UI components are given. So if your application is similar to that, you will be having GUI presentation part. Yeah, yeah. I'll go, with the content order. Okay. So if you have any doubts in previous sessions, you definitely can bring. But if the topic is not yet started, I don't recommend. Okay. Maybe personally you can ask me if you have anything. During discussion related to topic or previous topics, we can talk. Okay. Yeah. Yes. No, not depth into that, but basic authentication authorization concepts will be covered. Send me if you have any specific discussion. Send me that content. I'll look into it. Okay. Yeah. You can just send me in WhatsApp. You know, if that is a known concept, I can add, or else I'll prepare myself and add it. Okay. Mhm. No. So yeah, if it is a simple standalone application, we will be having GUI. So in this GUI, you will be having UI components. Once you submit this data, basically we don't, you know, we will not maintain any containers in case of standalone application. Directly we, convert everything as a .exe file. Maybe the database is a separate .exe. We will install in computer standalone machine. Maybe if if it is something medical shop management. Okay, medical shop management software, we will be deploying it into that medical shop particular machine. Okay, so there we will be installing one database also, then we will connect it. Maybe this application doesn't require internet also, which is running in standalone. In such case, especially we don't maintain any containers to run your Java code. Let's say if you design this completely in Java, your controller service DO logics, we just run it on our JVM JRE, and we will be having maybe DB. And while designing your application, you generally follow all core Java concepts here. So when you submit data from your GUI using event listeners, your controller, let's say if it is a listener, this listener will get the data from UI. From here, Java journey will start. From here, Java classes journey will start. So controller will send data to service, service to DAO. So generally to send data from here to here, here to here, we need objects of these classes. Let's say if I name these classes A, B, C, if you want to send data from A class to B class, you generally create object for B. Sending data means calling methods. Okay. In other words, if you are calling methods of one class to another class, you will be creating object for that particular class. And so that A class can call B. Right? If one class needs to call another class, object is required. Without object, we can't do that. You know that, right? Then B class, the mainly once you implement your logics, right? Once you implement your logics and subsequent methods, if you want to call one class is having a helper method of another class, and this class, if it is having helper method of a different class, you will need to call them one by one. A calling B, B must be calling C, right? Each one by one. The methods, this, this way we create object for them, so that in your JVM, actual in your RAM, basic objects will be created. A object, B object, so that it is possible to use the data of that object for the computations. Into your physical RAM memory, objects will be loaded. So from there, actually, this application journey starts. So A created B object, B created C object. So I can able to connect to these objects. I can able to connect to these objects. Okay. So here, without containers, maybe here C may be connected with the database. Here you may need connection object. We will be creating that as well. Connection object. There is a different approach to create connection, but this connection object will help you to connect with database. So A will connect with B, B will connect with C, and C also can connect with D because connection object is available. So everywhere the object is required. Without the object, we can't able to talk with them. Without the object, you can't connect one class with another class. Even for database connection also, we will be creating one database connection object and we talk with database. So main importantly, if you see here, when you implement your application either by using servlets concepts or simple standalone concepts or EJB concepts or any framework, there are thousands of Java frameworks. Anybody should create end of the day, right? To connect one class to another class, they should create objects and then they can able to talk each other. In general, if we are not using any framework, this is how we will create objects and we connect them. Okay. So here frameworks, once frameworks journey starts, right? Frameworks usually will do this job for you, this object creation. Instead we doing it, frameworks will do that for us. Okay. Framework will do that for us. So servlets are capable to create this controller objects, which means when you use servlets, right? If controller is a servlet, you will be not creating any object of the servlet. Okay. Servlet is also one kind of a framework, right? J2EE. So while using servlets for controller layer, your controller object will be created by a container. When you use EJBs for service layer, EJBs entity beans here or EJB service, EJB session beans and entity beans here. For this classes also, you will be not creating any object. EJB container will be creating it. So first thing the containers are doing, they are avoiding this object creation by yourself. As a developer, you are not doing that during coding. Instead, you doing it, containers are doing it for you. So the container's first job, we talked about Tomcat, and we talked about WebLogic. Usually, as a developer, you are doing this, right? Instead, you doing it while using Tomcat. Tomcat given support for controller layer, which means servlets concepts we used. The servlets object who create Tomcat used to create. Tomcat create object of servlet. You never create. Whenever there is a UI request, when you submit UI request, whatever object Tomcat is created, it will communicate with that object. Same way when you use WebLogics, this is for controller part. When you use WebLogic with EJB combinations, EJB session beans for service layer, EJB session beans we used to use, and in WebLogic we have EJB container. EJB container create objects of session beans. And for DAO layer we used to use EJB entity beans. So EJB container. EJB container is available in WebLogic. So that container used to create objects of entity beans. So first thing we are avoiding this objects creation. Developer intervention we are avoiding for this objects creation. From servlets this journey started. When you use servlets with EJB combination, you never create objects of them. But if you wanted to talk, I'm not creating servlet object, I'm not creating EJB object or DO object. Then how you will acquire that object? Using dependency lookup concepts we used to find out them. Like that beans, whatever beans EJBs creates, right? Let's say the same application, if it is designed in servlets, you will be having a HTML here, you will be having a servlet here for controller, we will be having EJB session bean here for service layer, for DO layer EJB entity bean. Generally, when you want to create or when you want to talk with another class from one class to another class without framework, there you use to create object. Let's say if A class wants to call B class object or B wants to call C class, you use to create objects. If it is a simple standalone, hmm, this one, the first one is standalone. Okay, generally we do, right? There we don't use any special container, so we do that. Okay, when it comes to applications which are designed in servlets, if A class is servlet class, you need not to create this servlet class object. The servlet class will be taken care by your Tomcat. Tomcat will take care of object creation. Generally what it will do, Tomcat will create object and it will assign one URL for your servlet. Generally from browser we hit via URL, right? Any application, any application which you see, this is HTML UI. From here if you submit some request, let's say I want to sign up. So when you go to this page and when you try to create Amazon account by entering your data, and when you click on submit, this is the URL, right? It is showing amazon.in API AP/register. This is the URL. So that domain URL we will put to servlet. Same URL they used to put in the mapping. So using web.xml file, we do that mapping. In web.xml file, we mention this is the URL for the A servlet. So when somebody requests with that URL from this presentation page, when they mention same URL and submit the data, Tomcat will create object for this A class. If that is already not available, then via Tomcat, your data will be submitted to servlet. So the object creation of the A class will be taken care by Tomcat. How it will understand based on your URL, right? Whenever you submit it, so that URL is mapped to A class. So Tomcat will do what? If you are a first user, very first user for registering, then it will create object. Again, there are two ways of object creation. During deployment of your servlet, it can create, or else for first user request also it can create. Okay. During deployment servlet object creation, we say eager loading, and for first user only, if it create objects, we say lazy loading. Okay. But that same concept we have in Tomcat. So Tomcat may create your A class object either at first user request. Let's say you are the first user for Amazon. If you are trying to, you know, submit your data for registration, and if you configure A class with the lazy loading, right? First time it will create object for you. If it is later loading, even you request before here, even before your request from this page itself, the object will be created. Anyway, so here who is taking care of your A object creation is Tomcat. Then it can able to map via URL. So from here, if servlets wants to call EJBs, EJB session beans or entity beans, we used to register them in a naming services or directory services. In WebLogic, we used to have naming services or directory services we call naming services or directory services. WebLogic used to provide them. Even connection pool also we create and we put it in naming service. So you may consider this naming service or directory services like a store. In this store, these objects will be registered. Whatever objects you create, right? Session bean object will be registered in this naming service, and session beans objects also will be registered here with some ID. So here servlets used to look up. We will register here. This object will be registered during this object creation, right? Objects will be registered here. Objects will be registered here. This object also will be registered into this naming service. Objects we need to register using that register concepts. Then whenever you need this object, right? A servlets need this B class object. What it need to do, whatever object is registered here, it need to look up that object. Objects will be registered here, and this used to look up. It need to look up for that object. It used to look up means just it will go and check if that object is available. It will get that object. So using lookup logic, we used to get that registered object here. So whatever object you registered here, it will get that object here. Yeah, basically in WebLogic using EJB configuration files, we say register these objects during EJB container startup. So what it will do, it will create these objects, EJB entity beans and session beans. It will register into an address. If I want to look up something, you need to know, right, what you are looking up. You went to store and somebody put items in that store. You know, if you want to pick up, you need to know that where that item is and what is that item name, so that you can able to pick up. EJB will do that. I mean, your WebLogic will do that register operations. It will create object and it will register in one memory. Registry also again a memory, right? Naming or directory services. Your objects will be registered here. Okay. So whatever objects you have registered, that you need to look up using dependency. I mean, I don't want to call dependency injection now, but this is how we used to put our objects here and we used to look up. This is something like mom cooking something and keeping it into refrigerator, so that I can able to go and open refrigerator and I can take the item whatever I want to eat. Okay, she cooked curry and rice. If she put them into refrigerator, I can go and pick up the whatever items I need. Same way. So this web logic will preparing your EJB objects and it will register it. So whenever you need it, you look up them. Okay. That objects will be available there itself. Okay. So if A wants to call B class, it need to look up here. So once you look up, the object you will be getting here. B class reference you will get. B reference you will get. B class object reference you will get. So you know, if object is available, then nobody stops us from calling. You can call from here to here. Now same way session bean wants to call EJB. Session bean will look up for your object here. It will look up for your session bean, will look up for EJB entity bean object. So if that is class C, the class C reference it will get via lookup. Via lookup, we will get it. Then your EJB session bean is comfortably able to call EJB entity bean. And what about entity bean if it wants to call database? This data source, okay, this one also used to register here your connection pool objects. Generally we don't get direct connections, instead, right, for any enterprise applications in real time we use connection pool concepts here. So whatever connection pool you require, right, the connection pool will be created by WebLogic data source. So using WebLogic data source configuration, we register all our connections here. So from that connection pool, your EJB entity being used to get the connection. Connection pool also will be registered there, your connection pool. And we look up for each connection. Yeah, business layer onwards. Yeah, of course. Servlets objects also it can create. It is having servlet container also. Here instead of Tomcat, you can have WebLogic servlet container only. So that much dependency earlier we used to have. See, why I want to go into this concepts means earlier before how Java applications used to run while we have different frameworks. Now we don't have that dependency. How smart our frameworks designed, you will be realizing it now. Okay, so if you want to get a connection, also there is no way to get connection directly. Excuse me. We used to register our connection pool objects here into registry. Then from there we used to look up our data source object. If you have doubt, just check WebLogic data source collection examples. Easily you'll be getting how it will register and how we can look up. So this data source, WebLogic data source used to create connection pools, and via lookup we will get this data source object. Via data source, when you call get connection, connection object will be getting one connection. It will give it to you from the connection pool, so that you can able to establish communication with your database also. So, in entire journey, Java classes you are writing earlier while I was a kid playing with the, core Java, I used to create these objects. But when I move ahead with the frameworks, there is no opportunity to me to create any object. From here, right, even you will not be creating servlet object. This, I mean, controller object you will be not creating. Service objects also you will be not creating. And your DO objects also you will be not creating. Even connection pool objects also. Then, if I'm not doing, who is doing it? Instead, you doing it in a better way. The servers were doing that job for you. WebLogic kind of servers was doing that job for you. So connection pool it will create by getting connections from your database. Anyway, connections need to provided by database only, but that connections WebLogic used to create and register here. Then your EJB classes also it used to create and register. EJB session beans also used to be created. Servlets objects also will be created. Everything will be created by your container, WebLogic container. But whenever I need that object, something is cooked and stored. If you want to eat it, you need to look up for it. WebLogic is created and registered these objects whenever you need that object in a different layer. You need to look up for it. Servlet objects will be looked up by URL. Whenever browser hits this URL, Tomcat or your WebLogic will look up for your servlet class reference from this web.xml file. So container will look up for your servlet object based on URL. From here, servlets wants to call EJB session bean. It will look up for the session bean object from this registry. If that object is fine, then it will make a call to session bean service layer. From here, if you want to make a call to EJB entity bean, again you need to look up for your object. Whenever you need something, you should look up. While I am writing a class, controller class, I should look up which entity bean, which session bean class I wanted to call. As a developer, you need to do this lookup operation. And if this session bean class requires EJB entity bean, you need to look up whatever object you require. So a lot of code we used to write for doing registry, for doing lookup operations. We don't know, sometimes this object may not registered well. So while doing lookup, it may give null pointer expression by saying your object is not available. So this registry lookup, lot of code, lot of confusion. I don't remember. I used to, do some examples during my learning stage. Even now, I don't know. I must have some examples, but lot of code we used to write. Very, learning curve is very, very, um, difficult here while using this EJB's concept, especially. Servlets are fine. So, directly we can't consume these objects. We need to keep them into registry, then we should look up them. That's how we used to consume that objects. So, a lot of confusing concepts, but still they are powerful. Earlier, this is how the technology, they invented. So, objects creation job, this WebLogic will take care. And whenever you need that object, you used to look up it. But the same example, if I, you know, make it through Spring, right? Instead of you using servlets here, instead you using servlets here, if you go with Spring MVC, MVC also internally will use one servlet class. Okay, no doubt in that. So if you use your Spring MVC, if you use your Spring MVC one single controller class object, right? This dispatcher select object only need to created by Tomcat. So the Tomcat only will help you to find URL to controller class. Okay, only one class. From here, you need not use EJB entity beans. Okay, here you need not use entity beans. Simple Spring IOC concepts you can use for session beans. For entity beans, Spring ORM concepts you can use, and there are many other modules. Okay, use any module. Use any number of module for each layer, any type of module for each layer. They will be avoiding how smart here the frameworks designed, you can understand. Okay, for Spring MVC, this class only Tomcat is required. Only single class, not all the controllers. Only one class. This we call friend controller. Okay, we'll be talking about it later. But only this class will be managed by Tomcat. Any URL you hit, one application can have thousands of URLs. Every URL will hit to dispatcher servlet only. So that object will be only one object will be created by your Tomcat. From here, who will create the remaining controller classes objects? If I am writing here using IOC only, in MVC, including IOC concepts, right? We will be writing controller classes here. MVC with IOC combination we will use. So one servlet front controller is already designed as part of framework. That object only will be created by Tomcat. And apart from that, you will be writing so many controllers here. For each page, one controller will be writing in IOC based concepts only. So for EJB session beans, instead of using session beans, we use IOC concepts, ORM concepts, lot of models we have, right? You may use AOP concepts, mailing concepts, whatever it is from Spring Framework you use, or JDBC concepts, use anything. You need not to register them. You need not to register them and you need not to look up for them. In Spring Framework, yeah, no, okay. We'll be not using any Spring batch, but if you need example, I'll give it to you, okay? Small concept on Spring batch, yeah. So here, these classes or this session bean layer, like classes in Spring, or entity bin like classes here using ORM or JDBC, and connection pool also we'll be creating using Spring connection pool concepts. Spring providing connection pool also. So who will be creating these objects? Okay, you need not to do this register operations. We never do register operations, but you can consider like register. All these classes, right? Controller or service or DAO classes, we configure them into Spring XML file. Maybe if you want to consider this is like a register, you can consider it. We'll put all that configuration into XML file. In contrast with EJBs, I wanted to explain here, right? In EJBs, we used to do register and lookup operations. So here, same way, we configure all our classes into XML file. So if you want to call it like a register, yes, you may call. Will register. And the difference is you will be registering it. But whenever you want to call, right, this connection pool object, if you want to call here in your ORM classes, or if you want to call your DAO class into your service layer, or if you want to call your service class into controller layer, you need not to do any lookup. You need not to go and search. You need not to go here and search for it. You need not to do that lookup operation. Instead, you doing lookup in Spring, they used a different concept. Instead, you doing lookup, they will understand your requirement and Spring will do dependency injection. Okay, Spring will do what? It is very smart. It will understand that connection pool object you need here. So your Spring container will inject that object for you. Lookup means I go and search. Injection means I need not to go. I will stay at my table, put whatever I required, will come to my table itself. Lookup is like a self-service. You need to go and get what you want. Whereas dependency injection is like someone will serve it for you. You need not to do anything. You just need to mention in your order whatever you want. So that will be given to you. Who will do this job? Spring container will do this job. Container only will create all the objects. Even it can pass that objects wherever you want. Via dependency injection. Are you guys getting why I am explaining all this? We are avoiding object creation. When you avoid object creation, somebody should provide that objects. Usually in old applications, we used to register them and look up for that objects. Here in Spring, we registered that objects in via Spring container, and Spring container only will inject for you. If your A class is required B class, it will understand your requirement and inject it. If your B class is required C class, it will inject C object for you. And your C class is required some D class, yes, it will inject that class also for you. So object creation Spring will do, and wherever that object is required, it will inject it for you. We call it as dependency injection. These two are the main two important concepts. This is the main, soul of the whole Spring, main theme of the Spring. So Spring will, in Spring always we register objects and we inject them. And you need not to use any special containers here for your classes, right? You will be writing, consider your application is having 1000 classes. If you are writing 1000 classes, each object will be created and managed by your Spring only. Who will do that? Your IOC container. We load end of the day. Yeah, end of the day we load it into our IOC container. It will do all these jobs for you. There are many other features, but the main important two features are creating objects and doing dependency injection. It will do it for you. Yes, go ahead. IOC. Hmm. Jar only. Which one? No, actually you will be having dispatcher servlet, right? This dispatcher servlet we configure in web.xml file. We only configure it. Then Tomcat will get that object, get that class path, dispatcher servlet class path, and it will create object. This is predefined class. We just configure in web.xml file with the global URL. Instead, we putting a specific URL. Let's say if this form is having something slash register, or if some form is having slash login. If you have different set of URLs here, we don't hard code that here. We just give something a star here URL, so that every URL will be accepted, and that will be see the sent to dispatcher servlet only. Yeah, dispatcher servlet. All URLs we will map to dispatcher servlet. So every request will go to dispatcher servlets. From there, it will take care of moving your objects. Okay, if you want to see very high level architecture, right? This is how in Spring the execution flow will goes. All your forms, right? End of the day, this is the architecture. All your views request, all your views. If you have different set of views, right? Pages. All your views request first will go to Tomcat server. All these pages request will hit the Tomcat. When you mention URL, right? In that URL, right? URL is a combination of your machine IP address, IP plus port. So it will hit this Tomcat mission wherever you install your Tomcat. In that mission, Tomcat will having a specific port. Like if your server is like a colony, in that colony, Tomcat is like your house. Port number means your house number. So it will go to that particular machine and it will hit your port. In that port, if Tomcat is already running, this data from presentation layer, whatever data going, that data will go to Tomcat. So Tomcat will hit all this views data to dispatcher servlet. This is predefined class in Spring framework they given. Dispatcher servlet. Already designed. You need not to write any logic. Just all your views data. Either it's a view, A view, B view, and C view. Any data, first it will hit to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will decide it should go to which controller class. We will be writing specific controller for again each page. So I'll be having A controller, B controller, and C controller. If I have multiple controller classes, dispatcher servlet will distribute the request based on your request. If it is for A, it will go to A controller, B controller, C controller. These classes we write by following simple POSO principle, by following simple IOC concepts we write. From here, these controllers will send request to business classes. Business classes will send the request to DAO classes. Here you will be having, let's say if you have a service class and a DAO class, who will be creating all these objects? Your IOC only. This is the typical architecture. All these DAOs will use one connection pool only to connect with the database. See guys, you may look complicated here, but this is what the end of the day realization is. Okay, so it is simple to learn. Okay, learning curve is easy and doing it is very easy. So earlier it was very complicated, while using the PJB kind of frameworks. Now they made it simple. So this connection pool object also will be created by your IOC container only. So this connection pool object, this DO object, controller object. Okay, I'll put a circle here, which all objects will be managed by your IOC container means these classes from here, right? All these objects. All these objects will be managed by IOC container. right? Write any number of classes after dispatcher select until this connection pool. Just a minute. Hello. Good morning, sir. లేదు సార్, నేను మాట్లాడతాను. మొన్న చెప్పాను నేను వాళ్ళతోని, అంటే మళ్ళీ వెంటనే ఫాలో అప్ చేయలే. అడుగుతాను ఇవాళ. యా 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 లేదు సార్, నేను మాట్లాడతాను. ఓకే ఓకే. యా. So end of the day, all these objects, right, will be managed by your IOC container only. So whatever count you write, right, all these objects will be registered. This is also very old concept, registering via XML. Nowadays you are not even doing that. In XML file, we will be putting all these classes, A to Z, whatever you write, right, all classes we configure here. And finally, we load this XML into IOC container. Container also again a simple Java class. This IOC, whenever you load XML file, what it will do, it will read all your classes from XML file. So just configuration only, right? It will read that your package names and your class names, and it will go and pick each class and it will load and create objects, A object, B object, C objects, all this from controller to DAO and connection pool. Everything will be created by your IOC. So two containers will work in generally while using Spring Boot or Spring MVC concepts, right? Two servers will help you. One is Tomcat. This is the main gateway where every view request will you get, and it will create only one object of your Spring framework, which is dispatcher servlet. The remaining all classes, this is predefined class. Even as a developer, you are not writing it. You will be writing only this controller service DO classes. All these classes you will be writing and you will be configuring in XML file and loading it into IOC. Then IOC, this means registering. This means registering. Keeping all that classes names in XML file and you will be registering into IOC. IOC will do what? It will create all these objects. A, B, C, D objects, whatever you mentioned. And if any object required another object, you need not to worry. Why, via dependency injection concept, right? It will create all the objects. The first step, your container, once you load, what it will do? Create all objects. Then I need them. One object required in another class. This connection pool required in DO classes. I have thousands of DO classes. Everywhere I need the same object. What it will do? Via dependency injection concept, these objects will be served to all your DO classes. So the DOs can connect with the database. And my DO objects required in service class. And my service class is required in controller class. Via dependency injection concept, it will share that object references with your dependency layer classes. Dependency injection. Earlier we used to book a table and we used to go to hotel and eat the food. That is lookup. I'll put a order and I'll reserve a table and I used to go and eat it. Nowadays we are ordering food. Order is delivering to us. They are injecting. Instead we going, they are sending. So earlier in WebLogic we used to do that. We go and get the object. Now we are not doing it. It is serving it for us. Instead we take it. It will provide to us. Yeah. Yes. Everything is a open source library nowadays. Earlier, there are no much skilled people whoever worked in WebLogic, organization, WebLogic or WebSphere, right? Those time those skilled developers created connection pools, and this. sell it as a server. Later, everybody realized that those are not a difficult concepts. Even I can write the connection pool concept and a open source class, and that I can share it with everyone. So well refined classes, many people given many connection pool open source libraries. Just we will be using that classes to create connection pool. Nowadays, everything is available as a jar. They given as a classes and free. So we'll be using that free library and using IOC we used to create them. Anyway, you will be writing logic for it. What is your URL, username, password to that data source class? We will be supplying it, and once you load it, it will create connection pool for you. Everything. That is what I'm saying. Believe me. After dispatcher select, whatever classes you are seeing, whatever classes you are going to write for your entire application, all that objects will be managed by your IOC only. This is first thumb rule. Only one object will be created by Tomcat, that is dispatcher servlet. In MEC, you will be seeing very in-depth flow of it, but as of now, to conclude, right, who is doing what? So IOC container is going to do create all these objects, and wherever you need that object, it can understand your requirement and it will do the dependency injection. So configuring all your classes via XML file is your job initially. When Spring introduced, this is how we used to do until last 5 years. Later they proposed annotation concepts. While we are annotating these classes, while we are annotated these classes, okay, even this configuration also they avoided. Nowadays we are not even using it. You need not to configure classes and register it. When you start IOC will go to each and every package and it will do search, like when you do antivirus searching, right? How it will search each package of your folder. Similar way, it will go to each package of your code and it will identify all the classes and it will create objects for you. You need not to configure even one class. Earlier we used to do, but now we don't have that. Everything is automated in such a way framework is designed. You just focus on creating these classes A class, B class, C class. Who will take care of objects creation IOC? When you start IOC, it will go search each package and it will pick all your classes, create objects for you. And my one object required another object. It will understand that requirement via auto wiring concepts and it will do dependency injection also. Okay, objects it will create and automatically dependency injection also it will do. What else we need as a developer? Just you focus on your data read logic which is coming from view. From here, send your data to service. In service, just to write your business logic, whatever plus minus divided by whatever you want to do. Later, to do save operation, send your data to DAO. Nowadays, this DAO logic you need not to write. Completely avoided this DAO layer. On the fly, it will understand your requirement and creates DAOs also. But that is very advanced level. Okay. So you will be sending it to DAO. DAO will take your data to database and it will save it permanently. So earlier to implement the same, we used to spend months of time for the same requirements, right? For the same requirements, we used to spend 5 times, 6 times more time we used to put. Even if you see olden days while building, 3 floors or 4 floors constructions, lot of human intervention is required. Lot of time it used to take because there are no cranes or there are no, like nowadays we are using a different engineering concepts. So that concepts are making to build constructions very faster. Instead of human intervention, if you introduce some machineries or if you robots, they will do faster than us. Same thing happened here. Okay, earlier we used to do all this with the manual configurations. Now it automated everything. So what it is doing, it is scanning your classes and it is creating objects for you, and it is understanding your requirement dependencies and it is injecting for you everything. IOC container it is doing it for you. So they reduce lot of development time and easy to develop. Technically framework is very strong. It will follow all the good practices. So even a skilled or unskilled developer can you know result to the same. That is what the benefit you can see. Getting, guys? Did you ping to me? I shared my number, right? 9182662482. See, I shared it now. చాట్లో పెట్టండి చూడండి. No, no, నాకు పింగ్ చేయండి. I'll add. Just ping to me. Okay. అది ఏ పేజ్లో పెట్టాను. I'm not sure. Okay. ఇదా? Yeah, maybe try it. Okay. So we will be seeing how to create. For all these layers, we can't give example as of now, but consider all these classes as a simple poso class. Okay. Any layer we will be writing like a simple plain Java class only. So I'll show you how to create, right? How to write a class and how to configure it in XML file. Step one, we need to create a class. Step two, we should configure it in XML file. Step three, we should load it into iOS. Tomorrow we'll see first example. Okay. I hope this session helps you a lot to understand what containers used to do and how Spring uh, doing the same thing with the less manual intervention here. Okay, you will be realizing it. This is the conclusion. Okay, end of the day you will be seeing it. Tomorrow we'll be starting with first example. Okay, with the same reference, right? I'll explain it to you. You'll be getting it easily. Are you guys getting? Hello? Yes, yes, yeah, great. So now it is easy. Earlier the learning curve is very difficult. Even I spent for easy a lot of months, but I didn't get that. Means you need to put a lot of efforts to learn. Exhibit two concepts itself I learned later. Spring came into the market. I left that. But see, learning itself is difficult. Then I used to think how these developers are doing. Very, very, very poor developers used to do that business logics in EJPs. No, those days. Now they made everything simple and everyone can able to write this code. I'm even recommending UI people or testing people also learn the spring because doing spring based application is simple. Who knows basic core Java concept, they can able to do it that much easy. The framework made it. Okay, yeah. So we'll be seeing it. Okay, you will be realizing it from tomorrow. We'll start with examples. This is our blog link, right? For video blogs I'll share, as today is the first recording, right? The previous recordings you must be seeing in YouTube. Still, that videos also will be available for you. Maybe by tomorrow, I'll be making it available. So go to this blog link. From here, we will be seeing all the examples.